Welcome, everyone. I'm here with a very, very important guest who is a defendant in one of the most important cases that is currently taking place at this time in the United States. And there's a lot that can be said about it, but I guess I will let our guest introduce himself and describe himself as he thinks is best. Chairman Omali, do you want to tell us about yourself?
Thank you very much, Caleb. I would also like to express my appreciation to you, CPI, for the immediate response that you and your organization made to the attack that was made on me, my movement, on July 29th, 2022. It was an immediate response and highly appreciated. So I just want to say that. And also, as you said, my name is Omali Yeshitela. My history goes back nearly 60 years in terms of involvement of the struggle for the liberation of Black people, African people here and globally. I was initially an organizer with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. That was the organization that promoted the slogan, Demand Black Power. It was the bridge that existed between the civil rights movement and the struggle for national liberation in this country. And I was a part of that as a young man. And moving forward beyond that, I became a part of an organization called the Hunter Militant Organization, or JOMO. And later we built the African Peoples Socialist Party in 1972. So I've been extraordinarily active. I started off in responding to the very obvious aggression that was in horrors imposed on African people by white people, and I had my immediate response to that for a while was one based on an assumption that there was something about this, that there was, white people attacking Black people, and I did not understand the political and economic basis for that. It took a while for that to become clear. But I did, through the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the slogan for Black Power was something that was a slogan, anti-colonial slogan. It was a slogan that rejected the relationship that African people in this country have had with America, one that was imposed on us at gunpoint. While many people like to brag that somehow America is this country of a nation of immigrants. We are not immigrants. Africans were not immigrants. We were captives, and we were brought at gunpoint. And we and the indigenous people here are the only people who did not come to this country looking for a better way of life, but lost a better way of life as a consequence of this relationship. And we've been trapped with this conundrum. And the U.S. has been trapped with this conundrum. Most of the colonial powers, the fact that everything that the colonial powers, including the United States, put forward as representing democracy, democratic rights, constitutions, and things like that, were rights, democratic rights, constitutions that were not intended to cover colonized people, whether we're Africans, the indigenous people here, et cetera. It was not intended. And the conundrum came at the point where we achieved enough freedom of expression and motion to be able to challenge this relationship. And America itself and most of the colonial powers were confronted with a contest about preening as this great democracy, these great democracies on the one hand, rule of law on the one hand, while no law, it was lawless in terms of how it treated African people, whether in this country, the indigenous people who in this country still live in concentration camps, euphemistically referred to, as Indian reservations, the theft of Mexico, I mean, just so much, half of Mexico, all of the stuff here and around the world. So this was the conundrum. And subsequent to, as you know, it was 1857 that the Supreme Court made this critical ruling that Black people had no rights, that white people had to respect. That was,
I'd like to give some context to
yeah.
what you said at the beginning, just so
Sure.
the viewers know what you were referring to. So last year, I believe it was early August of 2022, we were having our CPI convention, or our conference in Chicago. And a few days before that conference, I started getting phone calls and text messages from my friends and allies around the country. People like Garland Nixon, people like Daniel Villa, the radio host in WBAI, saying that they heard about how your home and the home of other activists in Florida, as well as in St. Louis, Missouri, had been raided by the FBI. And I heard about this, and I was even more disturbed when I found out the allegation was that somehow you had ties to Russia, and that was the justification for them flying drones into your home, dragging you out in handcuffs, having SWAT teams kick down the doors of homes, etc. And so I made a phone call, and we just wanted to do anything we could to immediately support your organization in the face of this attack. And so just a few days after this horrendous raid happened, we welcomed representatives of your organization to our event in Chicago. We gave a standing ovation. We gave a huge amount of support. And Tara Reid was there and also made a point of giving you support. So was Garland Nixon and other people. And that was a really important moment for our organization. And I will say that a few days before our conference, after you all had already agreed to speak, I got a phone call blackmailing me, basically urging me to cancel the conference and saying that they would put private information about me on the internet if I did not call off the conference. And I said, well, I'm not going to cancel the conference. That's just not going to happen. And so we went ahead with the conference, and you were there and Tara Reid was there. And it was a really definitive moment in the history of the Center for Political Innovation. And it was a moment where I'm particularly proud that we saw someone who was under attack, and we offered our solidarity unconditionally based on nothing but understanding that we are against U.S. imperialism, and that when they target somebody, especially on the allegation that they might be Russian agents, it's our duty to stand with them, no questions asked. It was a particularly meaningful moment in our organization. So I want to thank you for giving us that opportunity to raise awareness about your case so early on, because from what I understand, it's only gotten worse since then. Not only did you get raided, but you've been indicted. Would you like to tell the audience about what happened, the raid that happened and how that's then led to this criminal indictment you're facing?
Well, the raid happened, as you mentioned, just a few days prior to your conference. It happened on July 29th, 2022. But we had already been attacked and didn't connect it on July 2nd. Our office headquarters in St. Petersburg, Florida, had been attacked by what appeared to be a lone person who pulled up in broad daylight in our parking lot and took a military-grade flamethrower from out of the trunk of his car and torched the red, black, and green flag that was on a 50-foot flagpole, 15 by 25-foot flag. They torched it, and in broad daylight. They left, and very reluctantly, the police investigated it, and because we had captured the license plate on our security cameras and what have you, and they said that it was a person who just driving by every day who had seen the red, black, and green flag, ugly flag, hated the flag, and hated socialists, and therefore torched the flag. They finally determined that they could not charge the person with arson, but they charged them with some kind of criminal mischief. And so that would happen on July 2nd. It was later that we connected it. It was a dry run because I should tell you that in that same building in November of 1996, the U.S. government, along with local police, some 300 strong, attacked that same building, again for speech, because they had a cop had shot an African, murdered an African just 3 blocks away from our office. And because we worked that community furiously, they were concerned about a meeting that we were preparing for on the day the determination by a grand jury of whether that cop would be indicted or not. And so they blocked off the streets. They determined that the meeting that we were having in our own building was an illegal meeting. And they attacked it. They used all the tear gas in the city of St. Petersburg, Florida, literally. They had something like 300 different law enforcement forces from St. Petersburg, Florida, and neighboring communities. They had packed the stadium several blocks away with National Guard troops. They had the state cops and everybody there. So that happened in 1996. And when they attacked in 1996, they brought in helicopters and a light airplane, and so everybody thought we were going to be looking at what we had seen in Philadelphia with the MOVE organization earlier than that. So when they came with the helicopter, tear gas everywhere, the people brought a helicopter down by gunfire. And so this was in 1996. And so I think that that they ran the July 2nd attack on us as a dry run to get a sense of what kind of response they would get when they later came on July 29th. So, but every time they've attacked us, it's been a question of speech, them not liking what we say. We said in this instance, we were opposed to this, the murder that was happening in Ukraine and Russia. That was an assault on Russia. We said it's an assault on Russia that's using Ukraine as the vehicle for making that assault. That it's not a new thing. It goes even beyond the 2014. It goes all the way to 1918 when the Soviet Union had come into existence and was immediately invaded by colonial powers everywhere, including the United States and Japan. So that's always been an assault there, initially because of the communist question. But if we remember, when we go back to that assault, 1917, the things that were driving that whole, even the First Imperialist World War, which happened during that same time frame, it was driven by the issue of colonized people. It was a war to redivide the world. And who were they talking about redividing? And that was Africa, and that was various other places in the world. And of course, the Soviets under Lenin refused to participate in that war. And that became a problem. You're looking at the same time frame, Pitts, where you're looking at Sykes-Picot, you're looking at the Balfour Declaration, all of the contradictions that we see bunched up now, whether it's Palestine, whether it's Africa and African people, et cetera, and Russia, they all came together at that critical moment. And so, and now we came out in opposition to the U.S. and in support of Russia in that particular war, because it made sense, because we saw that it was an aggression being made against Russia, and it goes back, as I said, more than 100 years. So. And so that was something that put us at odds with the United States government. But the biggest thing we are convinced is that the position of our party and the Uhuru movement around the question of colonialism and the fact that African people have to be free, and we have to have a capacity to be self-governing people, just like any other dignified people on the planet Earth. And this has been the critical issue. This is what made them kill Malcolm, even the assassination of Martin Luther King, the attack on the Black Panther Party. They were attacking an anti-colonial movement here as they were attacking it around the world. They killed Lumumba, they overthrew Nkrumah, they killed Shea in 1967. I mean, all of these struggles were struggles against colonialism. And some of these struggles against colonialism had achieved a certain revolutionary character in opposition to capitalism. And some of us have concluded that the capitalist system itself rests upon a foundation of colonialism, the extraordinary extraction of wealth value from colonized peoples, and particularly in Africa. So this is part of what helped to define how we were moving, and part of what we are convinced is responsible for the way the United States government attacked us. So the government can attack us and get away with it easily.
Describe what happened on the 29th. Like, what happened when they raided your home? What was it like for you?
When they raided the home, my wife and I in St. Louis, this was pre-dawn, 5 o'clock. My wife and I were sitting at the dining room table and preparing for her to come to the Uhuru House, our headquarters here in St. Louis, where to preside over a doula training, where there were African women being coming to be trained as doulas to help with safe births for mothers and for children. And in St. Louis, there are enough Black babies down the first year of life to fill 15 kindergarten classes. So that's what we were talking about. And suddenly, out of the dark, this booming voice comes telling us that everybody in this residence should come out with our hands up and our hands empty, and that this is the FBI. And then on the back of that, these explosions began to go off all around the neighborhood, around our house. And we were to see in the back stairwell of the house, there's explosions knocking plaster off the walls, etc. So it was hard to actually believe this thing was happening. Initially, I asked my wife to stay. I would go downstairs and she should phone and let people know we were under attack. But she couldn't, because they had jammed our phones, so we couldn't communicate with anybody. So I get downstairs, and when I get downstairs, in front of my house is this armored personnel carrier. And standing in front of the personnel carrier, on the side of the personnel carrier, were these camouflage wearing assault weapons, toting, mostly men, and who had these laser targeting devices attached to their weapons, and these laser beams were bouncing off my chest. I assumed that they were going to kill me then, because they had killed Fred Hampton similarly in December of '69 in Chicago, Illinois. So I assumed they were going to kill me. I made it downstairs, and I'm convinced if I had stumbled, or if I had responded in a way that might have been normal that time of the morning, have been in bed or something like that, that they would have killed me. And so I get downstairs, they zip tie me behind my back. My wife, and she comes down, she opens the door, and she's almost hitting the face with a drone that's going up the stairs into the house. So she's handcuffed behind her back. So we're saying, what's going on? What is this about? And then finally they say, well, that there's going to be an indictment later this morning of a Russian national, but he's in Russia. And your name is in the indictment, and we have a search warrant to search your place. So we said, let's see the search warrant. And they said, well, I don't have it on me, but it's somewhere around here. Let's see the indictment. Well, the indictment is going to happen later this morning. So they took cell phones, they took laptops, they used battering rams, they broke windows, they broke doors, things like that. And at the same time, these flashbang grenades are still going off around the neighborhood. They've actually put tape on the doorbell videos of the neighbor next door and occupying the front stoop of his house and much of that community. At the same time, they were doing this in St. Petersburg, Florida, where they raided the Uhuru House, our headquarters there. They took our radio off the air temporarily. They went into our files. They raided our financial files, and they took laptops and videos, any kind of recording devices in my home there, where this is where I grew up and where I moved to St. Louis from there. Look, there must have been 30, 40 of them that I've seen on videotape who went into the house. They occupied, they stole materials from there. And then they went to a young party leader in that city. They knocked on her door and told her that this is the police and that somebody's breaking into your car. We want you to come out and take a look at it. She walks out, the FBI is waiting there. And in South St. Louis, they go to the Solidarity Center that we have in the mostly white community. They attacked that center, they broke all the doors. They broke use electric battering rams and what have you. They put tapes over they disconnected the recording security stuff. They went upstairs and raided the apartment of two people who lived there. Jesse Neville, who was one of the Uhuru Three, and his partner. They went to another neighborhood where Penny Hess, another of the Uhuru Three, was living with her roommate, and they occupied that. They held them all at gunpoint. They knocked down windows, they broke doors, et cetera, et cetera. So this is what they did. And again, we saw nothing. We saw they provided us no real basis for doing that. And then they locked us into this legal purgatory that they called unindicted co-conspirators. Because we're unindicted, we don't have legal standing. We can't go to a court and say that we want to stop. We want the court to stop these guys for doing what they're doing to us.
So after this horrendous raid on your home,
right.
You find out they're raiding your home and they're raiding your party offices. They're doing all of this because they say that you're tied to somebody that they've indicted who's on the other side of the world in Russia, right? And on that basis, they did this to you. And you're telling me that then, because at that point you weren't indicted, you had no legal basis to fight against what they did to you. You were declared an unindicted co-conspirator. So continue. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're unindicted. So it's a sort of legal purgatory. They've got tons and tons of materials that they've taken from us. Later, they would offer a $10 billion bounty to anybody who could come up with information on the person who we're supposedly working for in Russia and us. So they got all of our materials, etc., but they've got nothing. So they're asking $10 million they would give to anybody who could come up with information on this person, Alex Ionov, in Russia, and us. So this is what happened. So later, something like almost a year later, 9 months later, they indict us. And they indict us on charges of being some Russian agents and working for Russia, and we did not register as agents of a foreign power. And what we did to work for Russia, one, I went to Moscow twice in 2015 to attend a non-governmental conference, non-governmental organization conference of different from different places around the world, people who were looking into the question of self-determination, struggling around that question, a conference around self-determination. That's one thing that I did. I did that twice. I went to Moscow twice in 2015. And then what we did was we are guilty of having run for office in St. Petersburg, Florida. We ran a candidate in St. Petersburg, Florida, too. One, Jesse Neville for mayor. And then one, Akila Anai, a young woman who was at the time one of the 4 people who they had characterized as unindicted co-conspirators. We ran them for office. They ran on position for reparations against gentrification of the African community there. They said the Russians paid for that. The Russians were responsible for that. That was the way they were sowing dissent. And then they said that another thing that we did was that we toured 4 different cities in this country when the United Nations was having hearings led by Muriel Fanon, Frantz Fanon's daughter, and going through the African community. And it was a UN entity that was looking into the conditions of Black people in this country. And we went to each of them all over. We slept in the snow, etc. We attended it. And these were meetings that were attended by hundreds of Black people talking about the conditions of Black people. And so they said the Russians paid for that. And that's another thing that we did that was criminal. There's something else I'm leaving out, I'm sure, but they went beyond that. The church right across the street. We have something like more than 50 economic development programs to change the conditions of Black people in this country, and many of them are right here in St. Louis, Missouri. We've changed the north part of St. Louis, Missouri, on the material way, and we have purchased. Had under contract a huge church right across the street from my house that they attacked, which is in one of the most impoverished sector of St. Louis. And that church mysteriously caught fire. It was under contract. The
church was
The
burned.
church was burned, and it wasn't just a small fire. The church is unusable now, and they did things like the banks, several banks that we were working with. Some we've been working with more than 20 years. They stopped taking our accounts. They demanded mortgage payment for $80,000 in 2 weeks, things like that, and so. This was part of it, part of the assault. It was a massive, full pressed, offensive that they made against us.
And if you read this indictment, they haven't accused you of harming anyone. They haven't accused you of any violent crime. They haven't accused you of any involvement in drugs or anything. All they've accused you of doing is running some people for office, providing services in your community, having some Zoom calls and conferences about Russia, going to a couple different conferences in Russia. And this is their full-on response. Now, if you were to be convicted at trial, what could you be facing? I mean, I've heard it's up to maybe 15 years in prison, possibly.
15 years in prison. We're facing 10 years on one charge and 5 years on the other charge. 5 years, I think, on the conspiracy charge and 10 years on the charge of working for a foreign agent or something to that effect. I mean, I could tell you what the exact names of the things are, but that's what we're facing 15 years, which is effectively a life sentence for me, you see. And it's an act of terrorism, and what they have done, and this is the struggle we've been making with them legally. We've got great lawyers, and we've filed a motion for them to dismiss these charges because they're all free speech. There's nothing that we did, as you mentioned. There's no bank robbery. There's no drug pushing.
There's no crime.
Nothing. No crime.
You just engaged in your community as democratic participants in our society.
Exactly. And so what they've declared is that, and we can show. I mean, I went to Moscow. I mean, in 2007, I was in Spain, an international conference that they called in Spain. And at this conference, attended by people from everywhere, the Spanish government was one of the sponsors of this thing, even though it was an NGO. There were forces who came from the United Nations who were part of this. There were people from different countries who were part of this. And in Spain, they paid for 3 people to come, 1 from Europe, 2 of us from the United States, and they paid a stipend for us to get there, which is not what happened in Russia. In Russia, they paid out our fare to get to the place, etc. But this is something, and so there's that. I mean, I was in Ireland. When the so-called Troubles were happening. I was support the Irish struggle against British colonialism. Had great relationships with the Irish Republican Socialist Party and what have you. So there's a whole history there. I was in Nicaragua shortly after the Nicaraguan Revolution. So this notion that somehow going to Moscow turned me into a Russian agent it's ridiculous, and it's insulting in the sense that it's based on some assumption that African people do not have agency, that it requires somebody who they would call white to tell us what to do, that we don't know we are oppressed without that kind of intervention. So it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Now, I am happy to see you have received a lot of support from many different places, places you would not have expected it. But then that accompanies the fact that places that you would expect to support you haven't supported you. And that is what I've observed is the most bizarre thing about the case. The people who are stepping up, which is good,
right,
which you wouldn't expect to, and the people that aren't stepping up, which should be, which is very disappointing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that is an interesting situation because I think you may have referenced the interview I did with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah.
And which was, you would put him in the category where we wouldn't expect it to happen. But he was profoundly supportive. And I think that's based on the whole question of free speech, democracy, that kind of thing. I think that was part of what it was about. And but, he would mention during the discussion that you have Black Lives Matter. If anything happens with African people, all of the liberals and everybody like to go to Black Lives Matter, et cetera, and which is a Zuckerberg created slogan that doesn't mean a damn thing.
Right.
But when it comes to and they got tons and tons and tons of money. We spent more than $300,000 just in defense of this thing already. But we haven't heard from Black Lives Matter. We haven't heard from some of the so-called progressives in this country who are supposed to be for Black freedom, except not a single word. And then Biden himself and the Democratic Party, they are the white people who love us, and yet they are the ones who are persecuting us at this time because they are opposed to African people be free. They would have us live permanently in a state of welfare slavery, as opposed to being self-determining, which is an anti-colonial stance. And that's the thing that they killed when they killed Malcolm, when they thought they killed, and when they killed Black Panthers and other people around this, Black people around this country, that struggle against colonialism, to be free people, which is anything that a people with any semblance of dignity would require for themselves. So no,
we didn't get Joe Biden. He's Crime Bill Joe, right? I mean, he was overseeing the rise in mass incarceration. And Kamala Harris, the vice president, she was a vicious prosecutor in California.
Indeed.
And it seemed like both of them made their careers by imprisoning Black people. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, but more than that, I mean, you look at, that's absolutely true about Kamala and Biden. But beyond that, Biden is somebody who was opposed even to the Civil Rights Bill. He was able to win the Democratic nomination for president when he first ran because he was Trump light. He bragged that he could get those white people that Trump was being attracted to Trump. And he bragged about this relationship he had with Stennis, who was a reactionary, anti-African person who Klan related and things like that. Biden was opposed to busing that the liberals say they love because he didn't want his children to go to school in a jungle. These are the guys who are persecuting us right now. And so the thing is that Africans have been in this situation of feeling trapped since they killed Malcolm, destroyed most of the African liberation movement. There appears not to be an alternative to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. So you've got Africans trapped here, presumptively. But the fact is that we set examples of how you don't have to be trapped. We can do as Malcolm and do as Garvey, do as those other folks, and strike out for self-determination, to be a self-governing, self-determining people. That's why they would attack us.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about Russia, because, I'm an Irish American. I was born in Ohio. I don't speak a word of Russian, but I do work in Russian media, and I've been to Russia a number of times. And I was just in Russia for the World Youth Festival, and I saw people from all over the African continent that were there celebrating the new relationship that Russia has with countries in West Africa, the development projects that they're engaging in, et cetera. And we also just had a series of classes. We just had a weekend workshop with the Center for Political Innovation where we were going over the history of anti-imperialist movements in America. And we talked about how, when the Bolsheviks took power, one of the first things they did was they called their Congress of the Peoples of the East to talk about who they could work with to fight against colonialism and imperialism. And that included people like the Emir of Afghanistan, right? He was a monarchist, he was a conservative, but Lenin offered him military support because he was fighting the British Empire, because colonialism and imperialism was the main danger. And I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Black Belt thesis of the Communist Party and your thoughts on that, because that was something that many people were quite surprised by to learn about in our classes, right? The idea of self-determination for the Black Belt region, how Stalin called for the independence of the Black Belt. What are your thoughts on that historically?
Well, first of all, let me just say that I read something the other day where it talked about Hubert Humphreys, who was the vice president of the United States, and he met with Khrushchev. And he said that Khrushchev, who was former premier of Russia, and how Khrushchev gave him a lesson in Black movement in this country, stuff that he didn't know about, because in Russia, in the Soviet Union, they taught it in their schools. They taught about the struggle, and they considered racism to be an issue of national security. So that was deep there, and people learned about it. And Paul Robeson, as you know, had a really profound relationship with the Soviet Union. We don't unite with the Black Belt thesis, not because we are opposed to the question of African nationality. We think that the Black Belt thesis was something that was prompted primarily from forces coming from the United States, and part of it was a response to the Garvey movement. And Garvey's movement was Africa for Africans at home and abroad, and connected Black people around the world as being part of a single nation. So we believe in the question of national liberation, that African people constitute a nation. But a problem that we had with the Black Belt thesis, in addition to the fact that it challenged the philosophy of Marcus Garvey, was that it also supported the oppression of the indigenous people, whether it was intended or not. In that Leonard Peltier is in prison right now as a consequence of the indigenous people fighting for their land. The land question was one of the primary issues that the indigenous people suffered from. So we couldn't do that. That was one of the reasons. And also because it mirrors the reason that the Zionists were using when they went to occupy Palestine. They went to Palestine, they occupied it, and somehow they were there for a period of time, and now they have become something else other than the Europeans that they were when they got there. And the same thing happened to us in places like Rhodesia and South Africa. So that it was a necessary falsification of a relationship, historical relationship. So we believe, and firmly believe, we have the most serious solidarity with the indigenous people here. We believe that that even though we see ourselves as being Africans and struggling for African liberation, but they also recognize that the struggle of that ours is a part of the struggle, the revolution of the Americas. And just a little bit of history, people would be able to see that more effectively if they're not locked into these imagined borders that were created by European colonizers that didn't exist before then. I mean, I'm in Missouri now, and Missouri, as you know, was part of the so-called Missouri Compromise, where they stole a third or more of this territory called the United States, and all the people who were in it they now owned by Jefferson, by the United States, so they could extend slavery here, and it was owned prior to that by France. So this is the history that has to be unearthed, and the only way it can be unearthed is through the process of the liberation of the people who were colonized here. So I really felt really good about Lenin and what the Bolsheviks were struggling with in terms of the Conference of the Peoples of the East. I have that book someplace that with a lot of the documentation around that, and it was an impressive kind of thing, and especially in the face of how the colonizers were treating colonized people at the moment. What the Bolsheviks did was extraordinary. It was bold, it was brave, and it recognized the humanity of everybody, and did not, assume that other people didn't have agency if they were not white.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you is you described, and I would like you to talk more about these community development programs. I understand you have a farmer's market. I understand you have these classes for pregnant mothers. But do you feel like these programs that you are doing are more threatening to the imperialist state than just what you're saying? Do you feel like that's what they fear, is that you're providing services, you're feeding people, you're developing the Black community?
Yeah, I do think that's a real thing, because you got to remember that, especially in the African community, up until now and recently, the U.S. government, the colonial power, exercises its presence mostly through the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party wants to be the only answer that Black people have. It doesn't make any promises to us at all. It hasn't ever promised anything, so I think that's part of it. And so what we're saying is that there is an alternative, and that if we can do these things that we do, I mean, like I said, we have something like 50 some odd economic and political programs. You see African children in every community in the United States where every African community, you see African children playing basketball in the streets, dodging cars and what have you. And so we raised $160,000 and put a basketball court, a major first class basketball court there. And
That's
so
great.
say,
That's a beautiful thing to do.
It is, but these are alternatives. And why put a basketball court there? Because the children need to be able to see the future. They need to be able to see beyond the limitations that's imposed on them. But we didn't just do that. We took a so-called food desert, and we've established farmers markets. And the farmers market allows for Black people to come together also and sell to each other, buy from each other, and to create some capital that circulates in our community.
That's amazing.
We build housing for. We have a workforce program for Africans who locked up in these concentration camps, these prisons. When they get out of prison, they have a place to live while we teach them things. Because we just down the street, we've just opening up a bakery cafe. So we teach them, culinary arts and things, et cetera, and how to run their businesses. So this is the kind of stuff we are doing. And this is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the local politicians here, the local Black politicians, because everything we do makes a statement about what they're not doing. Everything we do makes a statement about what the United States is not doing. It's got all of our resources, but it doesn't do a damn thing for us, but we do it. So we're saying there's an alternative. Self-government is something that gives us the ability to take care of our own, and that's what we want. But they don't want that. And I can't overstate this. There's a whole industry that revolves around welfare slavery. There are people in poverty pimps and all throughout the structures of the government that the Democratic Party usually is mostly in charge of. And these people have their jobs, et cetera, by connecting to this process that's supposed to be doing good things for Black people, welfare programs that say, you can get it as long as there's not a man in the house. You can get food as long as there's not a man in the house. I mean, they make these kinds of requirements, destroying families and things like that. And there's a whole industry. They got industries of people who are social workers and just a whole array of things like that. So we represent a problem for them. And so that's part of what it is about. And we're training people in a variety of ways that will help people to be self-reliant, self-determining, and can see a future beyond being on our bellies, crawling, for the Democratic Party or Joe Biden or somebody like that to take care of us. We can be a self-reliant people.
Well, I've watched a lot of your speeches on the internet, and a favorite title of one of your presentations, I believe you have, it's called "If Jesus Was a Revolutionary, Why Is Your Preacher an Uncle Tom?" I think that was the name of your presentation. And it raises an important point, because a lot of people are really convinced that somehow to be a socialist or to be a communist or an anti-imperialist means that you must be opposed to belief in God or religious faith, right? That the two things cannot walk hand in hand. But it sounds like you were talking about a church that you had partnered with in the Black community that was burned, et cetera. Do you want to talk about your relationship with institutions and people of faith?
Well, let me just say that we believe, that the church and has been a real big factor in the African community, and it's got a lot more members than we do. And African people are up in that church, and that they speak a particular language that we need to understand. I grew up in the church. I am no longer a part of the church, but I understand it. I understand the people, and I've seen the church come under attack by the government. And despite the fact that I am not a church person, we defend the church from those kinds of assaults. Church burning is something that's you see happen. The most reactionary forces in this country burn Black churches, et cetera, et cetera. There's congregations for African people. It has all kinds of significant cultural implications. So we know about the church, and we also make a criticism of the church. I mean, every Monday, African people, the church take money that comes from African people and put it in banks. And every from what they collect on Sundays, and And that money should be going to creating things for our community, economic development, credit unions, the other kinds of things that can help to uplift the African. That's not happening. And so we're not Christians or Muslims or anything like that. We believe in the people. We really believe in the people in a way often that outstrips what the people have the ability to believe in themselves at the moment. But we think the people can do anything. And what we're saying is that you got a preacher who most often teaches you that you got to wait till you die in order to get what's coming to you. And we're seeing that that's not the Jesus that they teach you about. The Jesus that they teach you about was kicking over tables of the money changers in the temple and what have you. He was fighting against the Romans, who were the dominant forces at that time, etc. So if that was good enough for that Jesus, and why doesn't this preacher teach you about that Jesus to resist, to fight against oppression, to fight against colonialism that was being experienced by the Hebrews under the Romans? Why don't they teach you that? And etc. So that's where we are. We with the people, and we go where the people are and help. Hopefully we serve some purpose in raising consciousness of the people. Because unlike the people are scrambling day to day, the backs against the wall all the time, and it's hard for the people to have the long view. But I do this, as a part of a profession, revolution, and try to train other people to do the same thing and go into our communities to try to help the people to have the long view and have a scientific approach to what's affecting us in the world. So we respect religion in the fact that the religion and the practices and culture and belief systems of the people, but we're not trapped by them. And we don't want the people to be trapped by the imposition of those institutions on them that serves our oppression and exploitation.
Well, now I also wanted to ask you that in light of what Israel is doing to the Palestinians right now, I mean, just the relentless genocidal attack that is taking place, there have been some really crazy laws passed. I know in a number of states, if you want to be a government employee, you must pledge that you will never boycott Israel. Now they've expanded the definition of anti-Semitism to include saying that Israel is racist. You are not allowed to say that Israel is racist yesterday. They have this list of 11 things you're not allowed to say that they consider to be anti-Semitism. One of them is saying that Israel is racist. And this does point to like the power of what people might call the Israel lobby or the Zionist lobby. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's really interesting that there's a law that says you can't say Israel is racist, but there is no law that requires people to recognize "quote unquote" racism as it applies to Black people, Mexicans, and other people who are here. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Petersburg, Florida, there's a huge Holocaust museum, but the Jews were not killed in St. Petersburg, Florida. Black people were. And the indigenous people were. And so this whole thing, this whole Holocaust and anti-Semitism thing is used as a cover for imperialism. And if I were Jewish, I would be really concerned about this, because what it has done is reinforce this notion that's being pushed by people who really do hate Jews and want to kill Jews, that Jews are different, that the laws of social development do not apply to Jews, that somehow that some kind of the chosen people, master race kind of garbage that they put out. Then the law of Jews are just like everybody else, and the laws of social development applies to Jews like it does to anybody else. And if I were Jewish, I would run from that characterization of who I am, because that's the very thing that all of the people, the Jew haters, the one who want to kill Jews, that's the line that they put forth, that the Jew is different. The Jew is not like the rest of us. The Jew can be killed, et cetera, and murdered, and things like that can happen. So we don't believe that. And there are Jews who are part of our movement and play a really important role. And like a lot of the mobilizations, demonstrations against Israel, the illegitimate white nationalist colonial state of Israel. There are Jews in our movement who work to organize Jews in solidarity with Palestine. And there are laws in certain places where you can't say from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free. That you can't say death to Israel because they're saying you're saying death to Jews. And the question is, Israel is a state. It's an illegitimate white nationalist state. It's an extension of U.S. military power. It's a dagger in the heart of much of Africa and the Middle East to control all those resources. And it was created that the Balfour Declaration. If you look at the Balfour Declaration, when it was created, when the white powers decided to give Palestine to European Jews, it was a part of a geopolitical thing they were doing. The Sykes-Picot, one of the person, I think Sykes, who helped to develop the Sykes-Picot agreement that created the borders that you see now for Lebanon and Syria and Palestine, etc. One of them was there with the Balfour Declaration. So this is all like political contrivances and etc. And this whole notion about like Jews are not human, but master or chosen people, and that they claim the Palestinian land because God gave it to them 4,000 years ago. I mean, that's gentrification, on steroids, and they've made God a damn real estate dealer. That doesn't make any sense, and people should reject that in a very serious way, and Jews should reject that in a very serious way. And the fact is that Palestine, people in Palestine were Jews, Christians, Muslims, etc. Before the intervention that we saw with the Irgun and all of these other horrible forces, terrorist organizations that pushed the Palestinian people, the Palestinian Arabs out of that territory.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you is you've been doing revolutionary organizing for a really long time, and you've built a substantial organization. I wanted to ask you, how do you hold a group of people together? Because our society seems to really be infected with rampant individualism. People get angry about this, they get angry about that, your egos get in the way. And it seems like you've been, for your whole life, holding a group of people together to work and build these development projects in your community. How do you do that? And what is it? What do you appeal to in people to keep them from just kind of getting caught up in their own ego, especially in this age of social media and et cetera?
Well, Comrade Caleb, I want to tell you, it's not an easy thing. Man, we've been affected by this kind of thing too. There have been agents in our organization. There are people who think more of themselves than they do of the group, and that's something that it's infected, affected our work as well. I won't even tell you the kinds of things that have been, how I have been characterized. I can't. Well, you know something about it.
I think we do. But...
Yeah. And the thing is, though, that none of them can debate us politically.
Right.
So in the absence of being able to debate us politically, and that's the U.S. government too, that's Biden and the rest of us, they attack us with slander and other things like that. So it's, so come out and say what your real position is on colonialism, on capitalism, on socialism, on imperialism, on these kinds of things. But we work really hard at it, and sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes the government helps us by attacking people, Black people, creating circumstances, conditions that even though people may want to go in other directions, that they can't go in those other directions based on the activities of the United States government itself. And it's really interesting because you don't have to dig deep to find resistance in the African community. It really is there all the time. It's the most consistent revolutionary force that's existed in this country, which is one of the reasons they have to come get us first. And that's some things that we really hope people can come to understand, that they're on their way to get you. When they come at the Black Liberation Movement, they're on their way to get you. And and they think that they think that there are enough white people who are opposed to black people and Russia that they can come get us and knock us out of the way, etc. We have 100 and we have there are solidarity forces in our movement in more than 120 cities in this country. Wow. You know, and we exist, you know, in the Caribbean. We exist in several. I think you mentioned something about West Africa. We are in West Africa. We are Namibia. We are in South Africa. Having to deal with the damn ANC that was given free reign by the liberal imperialists in this country to dominate our people. So we are working in Liberia and Sierra Leone and various places like that. So we're struggling. We're small. And I say we are there, I don't mean that we have massive numbers, et cetera, but we're working on it. And we have dedicated forces and we are reproducing ourselves. And this attack, ironically, this attack by the United States government, where that has refused to even let us be seen by the people. Generally speaking, this attack by the United States government brought us up so that a lot of people could see us and therefore find their way to us to become organized and part of this movement. But we work at it. Political education is a critical component of what we do on a regular basis, but it's struggle.
So I want to ask, what can people do to raise awareness about your case and to offer you support at this time? Because the trial, I believe it starts September 2nd, correct?
September 3rd.
September 3rd, it starts. And what can we do to support you, to help more people know about your case? Like, what can be done? Because this is I think this is the most important legal case in the United States at this time, possibly in recent history. If they can proceed in imprisoning and convicting you for what you, at this point, they make anti-imperialism and community development illegal. And we have to do everything we can to stop this indictment, this prosecution, to win victory. So what can we do to support you?
Well, I think that's a great question. Let me just say you're right in terms of the significance of this case, because what the state is saying, and it has been agreed with right now by a magistrate judge in the 2nd District, I think that is in Florida, where we're going, is that they are putting forth a case that, first of all, they said that what we say doesn't matter if it's true. It's still disinformation if it helps the Russians.
That's outrageous. So you can't say true things.
Yes, you can. It doesn't matter if it's true. They say, in fact, we are saying that we can bring in experts, historians, and what have you, to show that the position we have on Russia and Ukraine and all these other things, in fact, they said doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's true. One. The other thing they're saying is that, and related to that, is that if we have a position that's the same position as the Russians have, then that makes us sort of employees of Russia, which means that anybody can be charged like that, and which is effectively what they're doing.
That's outrageous.
It is outrageous, and we're calling on people, read the documents. We want everybody to see. We're not hiding this thing like the government doesn't want you to see this stuff, but go. And this is the response to what you can do. Please go to Hands Off Uhuru. That's UHURU. And you can see everything we're doing with the case, and you can see how to join it, how to support it.
.com, .org,
handsoffuhuru.org.
Handsoffuhuru.org. I'll put that on the screen.
Please go, and you will find the documents as well. Look at these legal documents. Look how insane the position of the state, is. And so we want you to do that and make contributions. They had one time they had chased our fiscal sponsor. We had fiscal sponsors so that everything is above board, transparent. If you send money, we spent maybe $250,000 or so right now. They chased our fiscal sponsor off, so we couldn't take any money for a while. But we fixed that. So if people want to make contributions, they can do that. if people are lawyers and want to file supporting amicus brief, friends of the court, based on this, you can do that as well. And what's really important is that what they would try to do is have a trial that makes it impossible for us to talk about my history and our case, because it doesn't make any sense for them to say that the Russians, that I started working for the Russians just the other day. They said in 6 years of working for the Russians, they paid us $7,000.
Oh boy.
They said in 6 years that, but what I want you to see, check it out and spread it out. Look at what it is that we believe in, what it is that we've been doing. Look at the whole history. Look at Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the history, and that makes mockery of the garbage that they are trying to impose on us and the limitations that they would put on our defense in a court. So we say the trial has already begun. Your listeners, your viewers, and other people are part of the jury right now. So let's go ahead and spread it out. Let people see it. Let people understand it, so that it makes it, it complicates the ability for them to act like they're doing something in the best interest of justice and what have you, with this persecution of me, Penny Hess, and Jesse Neville.
Absolutely. So it's Penny Hess and Jesse Neville that have been indicted in this outrageous case. And we want to do everything we can to raise awareness about it. We know there'll be different protests and demonstrations that'll be happening over the course of the summer. And then we want as many people to be there in September when the trial opens. We want to be there to support you, to show that you have support. So I want to thank you for not backing down. I want to thank you for not surrendering in the face of this, and doing everything you can to raise awareness about your case, and being willing to accept support from anybody who will do this, and using your situation as an opportunity to educate people. Because I know that a lot of the people who are starting to learn about your case and all of that, they're behind on a lot of these issues, but they want to learn, right? They're learning about what this U.S. government and colonialism and imperialism has been about from the beginning. And I think working around your case and understanding your case is an opportunity for a lot of people to learn and to get into struggle. So I just want to thank you for taking the time. I know you're very, very busy preparing a very important legal defense. I want to thank you for coming on this channel and giving this interview. And I want to thank you also for the many members of your organization that we've had the opportunity to host at our organization. We're going to continue doing everything we can to support you and to support the Uhuru 3. We are on your side, and I urge everyone who's watching this to get involved as much as they can in the legal defense. This is the most important legal case in decades. They are trying to outlaw being an anti-imperialist activist, and we can't let them do that. So thank you, Chairman Omali. Do you have any final thoughts?
I want to thank you, comrades, and I want to say how much we appreciate the fact that like our movement, it's not what you say, it's what you do. And we've, out of the gate, CPI has been there. We've seen you challenge different officials and media opportunists and what have you around this case. And you've been there. And of course, our guy, John,
John McCarthy. Shout out to John if you're watching. We love John McCarthy.
Yes. So want to thank you so very much, and all of the CPI members and supporters. Thank you. We know you'll be there with us. Let's move it toward September 3rd, and in the process, let's put them on trial. That's the objective that we have to see. Put the state on trial. Uhuru.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Chairman, and we are in solidarity with you. Talk to you soon.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.